Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is my co-host on this spooky adventure, Tim.
Yo, yo. And what?
Fantastic introduction as always, Tim.
Well, I don't like introductions. I always like to, skip right past it and get to the good stuff.
Get to the good stuff. Yes. Coming up on this week's show, of course, is a horror movie podcast. We talk about horror movies every week. We are obviously going to be talking about It Chapter 2. It's directed by Andy Muschietti. Is that, if that's how you say the name? I think it is. This is obviously the sequel to It Chapter 1. Obviously. Be funny if it wasn't. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you warning before we go into spoilers, and we'll get into it. So, of course, at chapter 2, because in the book, because Connor's told me a bit about the book, and you've read the book, you love the book. So you know this.
Yeah, it's my favorite book of all time, honestly.
But just to explain the one basic thing I think that's important to compare the movies to the book here is that in the book, the adult sections and the kids sections are not two separate things. It constantly goes back and forth between them throughout. So the whole point is that it's mirroring, both sides of the same coin kind of thing as it goes. And one of the things that Connor said to me after seeing the first movie is that he was worried that the second movie might feel oddly redundant because they've just already sort of finished the story, and the adult section will feel weird on its own. And what's funny to me is that I didn't necessarily feel like it was redundant necessarily, but I did have a big problem that came from that. Which is the weird shoehorning of trying to make sure the kids are still in there in some way, in a weird way that it almost made the first movie feel redundant by trying to have flashbacks constantly to the kids. It was weird. But anyway, so it's about the adults. Years later, 27 years later, they all come back to Derry because Pennywise is back, and they have to try and save the day and stop him. And that's the premise of it, chapter 2. So Tim, the second part of the adaptation of your favorite book of all time, did you like It Chapter 2?
No, I did not.
I love it.
You're taking too much pleasure in that.
I could feel the pain and the hatred and the misery that it feels me so.
I mean, well, in all honesty, the problem is that, again, I love the book so much. I think it's amazing, and this movie, it's not the worst thing in the world. I think it's just really mediocre, which is that's not what you want when you're like, oh, I love this thing, it's amazing, and then it's like, well, I guess it's better than if they did a bad version of it, but I don't know, it angers me though that it's just this really generic movie. It's a lot of I definitely like the first one better, but I still do have kind of generally the same complaint as the first one, which is hey, you have a good cast, they're doing a good job, the human stuff is fine, but I have complaints about stuff here and there, but the horror is just so mishandled. It's just for a book that a lot of people would probably say is one of the scariest books of all time, and then for the horror aspect of the movie, it's just the bland, generic Hollywood horror we've seen for the last couple of years. Every potentially creepy moment is goes right out the window because it always has to end with a character turning into a CGI creature and then, running all herky-jerky towards the camera while big, loud musical stings play. It's that's the only, possible trope they have, which, hey, it's not a surprise because this one is written by Gary Dauberman, who that kind of seems to be his, bread and butter. Also, it feels super hollow, feels like they're just hitting a lot of points from the book without taking any care or nuance in it. Seems like they're just doing stuff that's oh, well, we got to put this in because it's in the book, which not to get into too big a discussion, but I do think that's a big problem with movies nowadays. I think fan culture has kind of gotten out of control, so people have to like incorporate all this stuff from the book instead of actually adapting things, which is what you're supposed to do with a movie. You're supposed to adapt stuff and make it fit because it's a different medium. But instead, people go apeshit if you're like, hey, you didn't include that character, or you didn't include that scene, so this is garbage. This sucks. You don't know how to make a movie, and it's destroying cinema, honestly. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love these comic book movies. I like that horror is becoming big, and they're doing these big budget things. But it's like it's taking the life out of everything. Everything feels so like shallow and hollow. I mean, that being said, there was a couple of things that I did like in the movie. Surprisingly, some of my favorite parts were things that deviated from the book and were just their own original scenes, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's again, like I don't want to be too negative, but because it could have been a lot worse, like but unfortunately, it just really is more down the middle than I would have liked it to be.
Yep, movie sucked. I basically hated it. It's not the worst thing ever, but I hated it, and I hated it more because it was so goddamn generic and mediocre that it lasted 2 hours and 49 minutes.
Oh yeah, it is so long.
Like, this movie in no way, shape or form, like, I can't believe how long that movie is and how little really happens in it. Like, it's insane. Oh, sure. And I can immediately point to several things you can cut. Number one, every single scene with the kids can go. Every single flashback to the kids. I mean, some of them are really egregious because it was literally moments from the first movie, which is only 2 years old. But like, it felt like they were determined to, like, because everyone liked the kids in the first movie, so we have to have the kids in the second one. So they went about this thing, and all I could feel like as I was watching it is that, yeah, maybe if you'd actually structured this more like the book, where it was going back and forth between them the whole time, that'd work. But it was just so weird for the first movie to just be the kids, and then this one to be the adults, but have to still cut back to the kids like constantly, like every 10-20 minutes or whatever it was. That really
So two things that I want to say about that is, first of all, I think it's really stupid because so there's this whole thing with like memory loss, and they kind of explain that like when you move away from Derry, you kind of start to forget, and so they don't really remember their past that much. And then as you kind of get closer and reunite with your friend, you start to remember it, and that works well in the book because the book starts with that, and then that's what like leads into the flashback. So that's when the characters don't remember, but then they slowly start remembering, and then you get the flashbacks and you discover it with the characters. But with this movie, it was just annoying because it's like, yeah, we already know this because we saw the first movie. It's like it's such a pointless, dumb device. And then second thing about that is, did you think, not every scene, but I was like getting distracted by some of the flashbacks with like the way the kids' faces look, because I think they had to like digitally de-age them.
Yeah, the kids had aged a little bit in the last 2 years, and they had to tamper with some of them. And also, it wasn't all the time, but there was like a couple of scenes here and there where I was getting like Superman mustache vibes. Like I was like, this doesn't look right. there was also, I think, at least one or two of them were ADR'd with someone else because their voice had broke.
That sounds
since and they had to like get someone who sounded more like them. Just, and it was like all this effort for stuff that I honestly think added nothing to the movie. It could have just all been cut. It felt very tacked on, and I think the memory loss thing was a big problem because it really, again, it dragged down the whole pacing, because it was like, okay, we have to spend all this time remembering shit as opposed to just moving forward with the plot. And then I would also, another subplot that, I mean, even though at least there one or two kind of fun scenes on its own, like there's an entire subplot with the villainous kid from the first movie, right? He's all grown up, and he and he breaks
Henry
out of
Bowers.
Yeah, Bowers. His entire subplot amounts to nothing essentially, and could be cut completely, and he would lose very little. I mean, it would give one character's arc maybe something else they'd have to fill in another way, but other than that, like it felt so separate.
Yeah, and I'll go into that in spoilers. I'll talk about what happens in the book versus that. But yeah, it was pretty wasted in this movie.
Yeah, because I had heard kind of what the point of that plot was in the book, and it sounded better. It sounded like, okay, that serves a purpose.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But and then the movie, it doesn't at all. It's like, oh, we have to have him back because he's still around, and we have to have this other element of danger. So the movie for me is really rough, and then the other big complaint I had, so beyond the length, and you already said this, but I'll make it very clear. I think the horror scenes in this movie are terrible, and hated them all. And there's one in particular where I can compare it directly to a scene from The Thing, from John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh yeah,
and just how much better that movie does this one sort of effect better, because it's a practical effect, and how this one's just this awful CG thing.
CGI.
I know, but my other big complaint, and this is something where it's coming from the book, so it's kind of like, I get that they're not just actually doing this, but there's an entire like plan in the movie to how to beat Pennywise, because there's like a ritual they have to kind of like build up to, right? All of that in this movie, and I know it comes from the book, but it feels like bullshit sequel stuff where all of a sudden there's just this way to beat the villain. And I'm sure in the book, like, that's there from kind of the start in the adult section, and it kind of feels like it's it's just running alongside the kids stuff and yada bit.
Yeah. Well, the problem is like they did take some stuff from the book, and then they also kind of made up some of their stuff, like I'll say right now, like all the stuff about the tokens, that was like all new for the movie.
Okay.
And again, it just seemed like kind of a bullshit add-on thing just to get like more scenes so they can have these, more flashback scenes and stuff.
Yeah, because the whole tokens thing where they all have to go and get like an item from their past, that's what kind of feeds into a lot of the flashbacks. And it also adds so much to the runtime, because like they all have their own like 10-15 minute section going around on their own, like, having flashback memories.
Now, one thing that really annoyed me too is I like one of the great things why the book is so good is because of the characters. Like, the characters are great, and that's what made the first one really stand out, is because you had these very distinctive kids and stuff, and I do like the people that got to play the grown-ups, but I feel like they with the character of Eddie, like you have Bill Hader's playing Richie, and his thing is he's like the funny guy, they call him Trash Mouth, he's always making jokes, and he's like a comedian and stuff, and I feel like they weirdly made Eddie like a Richie 2.0, where he's also like getting all these funny lines, and he's also like trash talking all the time, and it felt really weird. Like, I don't know, it's just like, because his character was always like, he was like a, the safe, cautious, like germaphobe kind of person. And there's definitely still that aspect of it here. But I also thought it was weird that he's also like the comedic relief, like in some instances, more than Richie, which I thought was really weird. And like a lot of the back and forth I just did not find funny, like where it's them basically just like saying like, oh, like, I slept with your mom, like, oh yeah, like, how was she in bed and stuff, and it's just like, this is just like painful to watch. It did not feel like, oh, like, cool friends coming together and like catching up on old times. It just felt like annoying people shouting at each other.
Yeah, I think the casting is good in the sense that they all, I mean, with the exception obviously with Ben, who's supposed to look really different, like, everyone looks kind of well cast. They all look that they could be older versions of the kids that we saw in the first movie, which is nice. That's impressive enough. Richie has a decent arc. Like, he has the closest thing in the movie, I'd say, to like an actual satisfying kind of story versus the rest of them.
And they do change something or kind of hint at something that's not in the book that I actually think was a pretty good addition. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but sure. I actually kind of like that, what they did with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of my positives, though, because like the Pennywise scenes I don't really like. I feel like the adult stuff is burdened by the memory loss thing, which, as you say, is very frustrating, because it just feels like, no, we already did all this in the first movie, and now they have to remember. It's just frustrating for us. Where, as you say in the book, because it's us discovering the story as they're getting their memories back, it works. It kind of functions together, and it's like a plot device. Here, it feels like we're just stalling before we get to the actual fight with Pennywise.
Exactly. Yeah. And I forget, because I think I was fairly positive on the first chapter, even though I still had the complaint about the horror aspect being generic. But I'm assuming you like the first chapter more than this. But were you still kind of iffy on it, or were you like, oh, it's mildly okay?
No, I think I was relatively positive because I like the kids a lot. I think the kids and their sort of Goonies-esque vibe of like, I think that's the part of the first movie that I liked. And
well, just so the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because do you think that really like anything that was good about the first one was probably because they were still working off of Fukunaga's script?
That's possible. That's a possibility. It could just be that the kids' story is more interesting. Yeah, the adult sort of part of the book might have always been, that's the part that kind of is the conclusion to the story. But that, I've not read the book, but I could even see myself reading the book thinking the kids sections are the more interesting ones, because that's all the memories. Even the adults are trying to remember what happened as their kids. The kids stuff is where most of the real action happened.
Yeah, but then people always though I think they always I feel like make it sound like the kid stuff just abruptly ends at one point and then we go into the adult section, but even up towards the end of the book it's still pretty closely intertwined. So I don't know, I think it's kind of weird to really differentiate it that much, because I don't know, to me it just the more interesting stuff does happen with the kids, but it still feels like one connected story. It's not just all of a sudden, all right, we're completely done with the kids now we're only gonna just be doing the grown-up stuff. But
that goes back to the problem though, is that it is one intertwined story. It's not it's not like kids section then adult section. That's just not how the story works in the book, and it's just not. And I don't think it really works in the movies, honestly. No. It feels so disjointed, and it feels like Pennywise himself as a threat feels oddly kind of just, I don't know, weird in this movie, because he is, in theory he's terrorizing the town like he did in the first movie, right? In theory he's going after all these kids and whatever, but you don't really see that much evidence of it. You see a couple of scenes where he attacks someone,
and I think it's a big shame, because I do think Bill Skarsgård actually does a pretty good job, but there's so little of him being Pennywise. It is even the majority of times, when a lot of times when he's attacking someone, it'll usually be as another form or another creature or something. So it's I feel like he really doesn't even get much to do here.
I have to admit, I wasn't even a big fan of Pennywise in this movie, and I think for me it's just a little too, I don't know, it feels less intimidating. It feels like more popcorn horror in a weird way, if that makes sense, where it feels like it wants to just be kind of this fun horror for people as opposed to actually trying to be intimidating or menacing. And I've seen people compare this movie actually to Marvel in a weird way, where it feels like a Marvel movie that happens to, it's trying to be a horror movie, but it's more concerned with having a lot of quick, quips and jokes and feeling just like a fun time.
Yeah, that was actually another big complaint I had, which I think people sometimes they get mad at you when you complain about this, but we need to lose the jokes in this movie. I think it's fine to have funny banter between the characters and stuff, but when you're actually making jokes, especially when you're fighting a monster and stuff, or Jesus, there's this one part where they have to throw in an ironic music choice that really bugged me. I was like, oh, this is so stupid. But it really has to go. And I know it works for, fun movie stuff, but it just takes me out of the movie so much. Can I give an example actually of a Marvel movie where a line really bugged me? But I was rewatching Endgame a couple of weeks back, and there's a line when Captain America, he's trying to infiltrate that army base, and he's in an elevator, and you have who's it Shirley from Community, I think, is in the elevator with him.
Oh sure, yeah.
And she says oh, your first day, and he says something well, not exactly, or he says something weird like that. That's basically a funny line to be oh, okay, we get it because he's been here, before. But it's just one of those things where it's oh, okay, but if you're undercover, why would you say that? Because now this person's going to have follow-up questions, and they're going to be well, what do you mean not exactly? Or well, why would you say that? Either you are new or you're not. It's just one of those lines where it's I get that it's funny towards the audience, but it takes me out of the movie, because now I'm thinking about the logic of why did this person say this? Why is this person not reacting weirder? And I don't know, that's the first example that came to my head. But we need to lose these jokes and these quips. I feel there's such short yeah, you can get a short laugh from the audience with something like this, but in the long run, I think it's like not good for your movie.
Yeah, it's a problem with mainstream blockbusters that's been happening. I think Marvel's a big reason for it, and well, I think it works on a lot of the Marvel movies to a point. Yeah. Here it just feels out of place. I only laughed once in the whole movie. There was one joke that made me laugh, and funnily enough, it was actually a scene with the kids. It wasn't with the adults at all. It was well, I'll say it in spoilers, but I'll just like there was one moment that made me laugh, and the first movie I think made me laugh a bunch of times, but I think like you said, it was all bantering between the kids where they were just being who they are to each other. It wasn't these like intentional kind of jokes, and I think the moment you mentioned where they used the ironic music choice for like a scary moment to be funny, I was like, yeah, that works in like Evil Dead. Like if you do that in like Evil Dead 2 or 3, sure, like yeah, it fits the tone of the movie, but this is not supposed to be a horror comedy.
No, not at all.
This is supposed to be a horror movie that's actually supposed to be creepy and whatever. And it really feels, and I think my thing with horror movies is that, I don't think horror movies should be big budget. I think they always lose something. And I think this
agree, 100%.
This movie to me is the showcase for that, because this is over long, it's over budget, and it's like these big CGI effects and all the rest of it. And all of it just makes me feel numb. All of it just makes me feel like there is no like atmosphere or emotion to any of this. And also, I thought the movie kind of looked like annoyingly dark in places. Like, and people said it's a horror movie. I'm like, yeah, but you can shoot a scene with limited lighting, or you can shoot something that looks underexposed. And this looked underexposed at points for me, where I just could barely see what was happening in some scenes, and it was annoying. Like,
No, I mean, I agree with that, with everything you said. And then, I mean, kind of like I was mentioning before in like the news section, like, similar to like, Marvel movies or something now where like, they always have to get like big stars and stuff. Like, I don't want to see this trend in like horror movies where, again, like everyone in the cast fit the role really well. But yeah, when you're watching a horror movie, I don't want to be like, oh, hey, there's Bill Hader, I love him, and like, oh, Jessica Chastain, like she's great. Like I think you do get it works a little better to have a little bit of a lower budget, maybe a less known cast and stuff. Like again, in other cases it might work, like with like horror comedies and stuff, like certain cases can bend the rules. But yeah, I don't like I was actually kind of worried with this movie that we're gonna start to see the like superheroification of horror movies now, where they are going to be big budget experiences with CGI and big casts, and kind of following a lot of these trends. And I really hope we don't see that happen.
I mean, the beautiful thing about the horror genre is that you're always going to have the low budget stuff because it's low budget, and that's what people start out making, so we're always going to have that kind of part of it. But like it feels like we might get this sort of mainstream horror kind of trend of like these bigger budgeted ones, assuming they make the money to justify it. That said though, we've never had this many horror movies constantly coming out, and most of them aren't this, but it's just the worry that there's going to be at least a few of these popping up now.
I mean, I think they already said this is on record for making like a buttload of money this weekend. I don't know if it's as much as the first, but I think it is doing pretty well.
Yeah, because Doctor Sleep's coming up, and obviously we'll do that when that hits.
That's the only thing I'm holding out hope for. Like Pet Sematary was a big disappointment for me. This was a big disappointment, but I'm really, really holding out hope that Doctor Sleep will be good.
I have to admit, Tim, I'm not expecting it to be. Like the trailer isn't that great. Like I think the biggest problem that trailer has is that it cuts to footage of The Shining, and I'm like, yeah, this looks like a great movie. And then it cuts back to footage from Doctor Sleep, and I'm like, yeah, this looks like a generic, boring, dull 2019 movie.
Well, on the one hand, I do like Mike Flanagan, so I do have trust in him. On
That's
one
true.
thing that I think it's gonna work for me, but I don't know how. It's going to work for mainstream audiences is the book, and I actually really like the book. I think not a ton of people, like even King fans, don't generally love it, and I think a problem of that is a lot of people probably expect, oh, we're getting The Shining 2, which is not what it is whatsoever. It is starring a character from The Shining, but it's like a completely different type of story. A lot of new different characters. So I don't know, maybe in the movie they will try to incorporate more Shining stuff so that it's not as jarring for people, but I don't know, I'm excited for it.
I'm cautious. I'm very cautious. What was weird actually is I got like there was a little bit before the movie played where Stephen King and I think Muschietti came on screen, and
cool.
and they were like, "Hey, well, you're welcome to the theater. You're seeing It Chapter 2. Don't forget the next Stephen King adaptation is Doctor Sleep." And they phrased it as if we were about to see a trailer. I was like, "Okay, sure, they're interested in the trailer. They got them to sit down and do a little intro for the trailer." But then I just went into the movie. I was like, "That was weird." It's like they forgot to play the trailer after the little intro bit. I don't know. Odd.
There needs to be some type of rule where they limit the number of trailers you can play on a 2+ hour movie. I was getting pissed. We must have seen at least 5 trailers, maybe more, and I was not happy.
Yeah, no, movie like. Yeah, because I was sitting there going like, this movie's almost 3 hours, and it's looking up, it's like another 25 minutes of like ads and trailers before. I went to an early showing because I knew like even at the early showing I wasn't going to get out until this time, and I was like, and it's one thing because I've seen a lot of movies about this length. Like Midsummer was really long, although I really liked that. Endgame was really long. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was really long, and those I mean, to be fair, those were all good to great movies. So I mean, whatever. But I really do want the next thing I see to not be like nearly 3 hours. Like 2 hours max would be lovely for the next thing I go see, please. My bladder would appreciate it. My patience would appreciate it. And I think this movie, coming after those and feeling more bloated and more unnecessary, because I think like you could have like just like made the first movie like 40 minutes longer and included everything you needed from this one into one movie. You totally could have. So yeah, it's a frustrating one, and it was frustrating for me because it wasn't that long into the movie where I realized I didn't like it. Like I knew quite early on, like I just don't like this movie. Yeah, I think we're about ready to go into spoilers. I think we've done what we've done. So we're about to go into spoilers, but I will just say before we do that you can support the show and everything we do here by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us for as little as $1 per month, and that $1 will get you access to an exclusive episode every month, streams after midnight, as well as exclusive episodes of other shows that we do on MailFuzz TV. $5 tier, you get to vote on an episode every month. In fact, this month, as this goes up, there's 3 or actually 4 votes up because we have the Octoberthon next month, so there's multiple votes up, one of which is public, so look for a link in the description for the public vote, but there's 3 other votes for the patrons to do on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and as much as I said you get 1 bonus episode per month at $1 tier, next month in Octoberthon you get 4, so do go and have a look, and if you want to support everything we do and keep all the content coming, you can go and do that there. So yes, so full spoilers for It Chapter 2. So I've seen a lot of debate about the opening scene of It Chapter 2, Tim, and that is the homophobic attack that happens in the opening.
And it's the famous opening of the book. There's a attack on Adrian Mellon, who is a homosexual character, and there's some like townie characters that are gay bashing him, and then end up throwing him over the water where he gets taken by Pennywise. What is the debate online? Is it just whether it's like appropriate or not?
Well, it's not so much that it's appropriate. I mean, obviously they're saying it's not appropriate, but I think the reason why it's not appropriate is because it does nothing in the context of this movie. It doesn't introduce anything. Sure. It doesn't pay off in any way. Yeah. Because in the book I believe that the point of it is to show that the police and stuff don't really pay attention to this stuff. They kind of just all turn a blind eye to the weird stuff that happens in Derry, right?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the book is they have these kind of like in between like the chapters with the characters and stuff, they have these interstitials where you see kind of like random moments in Derry, and it's really interesting because you see like how the way that kind of people react and live in this town. Like you do get the sense that there's something weird about it, and then people either choose to ignore it or like maybe that there is some type of presence that's kind of clouding them a bit as to, some of the horrors that's going on here, which is kind of like a big, deal in the book, because it adds this extra layer of like horror to it, where especially like, during the kids stuff, where it's like, like you think like, people like the grown-ups and the police are there to protect you, but they're turning a blind eye to this stuff. And then, and you see a lot more of it in the book, where it's not just the attack and then the death. You see like the follow-up with the, police interrogation and stuff. And then you see, like the people that actually, commit the crime, like, getting like I believe you see him like get arrested and taken in by the police and stuff. So it's not just like, the movie just makes it seem like this horrific crime that these people get away with. Which, that's not good.
The opening scene doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose. We already know how bad Pennywise is. It feels like a weird introduction, given that we've already had the first movie again. So again, it goes back to this whole idea of the way they've split the book into two. But and that's not the only problematic element, though. We'll get to the other one later, but I wanted to mention that and acknowledge it. So a big thing for the movie for me, again, from a pacing issue, pardon me, is that
and sorry, actually, real quick before we move on, it just kind of goes back to my point, and again, I think this is like a fault of Gary Duberman, because I feel like we've seen this in like other movies that he's written and stuff, where everything he does just feels so hollow, and this is like a great example of it, where it feels like they're just taking this because it's like, oh, hey, it's a scene in the book. It's a scene that people know from the book, so we'll put it in. But you lose a lot of nuance with it when you don't have that kind of follow up and the other kind of interstitial moments of the town where it kind of gives a little more cadence to it. And again, it's just like everything with him just feels very hollow. Like, there really isn't like any nuance to, and I guess we can blame the director on that as well. Maybe I shouldn't place it all on Doberman, but it just feels like very we're just taking this from the book because it's there.
No, I get you. The big pacing thing for me, though, because Mike sees the fallout of this crime. Mm-hmm. And he's the one still in the town. He calls everyone back in, and this is where I felt kind of like the pacing of this long movie kind of hit me a little bit, because like he calls everyone individually, so we have like 6 different scenes of like people getting phone calls, and where they are now. So we see Bill, who's like a Hollywood screenwriter now. He's a novelist, but he also writes the scripts for his movies. And that starts the running joke of him being bad at endings, which felt very meta, because people say that about Stephen King, but it also felt like this weird slap in the face because this movie has a very bad ending.
It's strange because like, okay, I get that that's a complaint about Stephen King, and it would be funny if it was like a one-time joke in the movie, especially when Stephen King says it. It's like, okay, that's funny, but they have to keep going back and back to it, and then it does feel like also like at one point, kind of like you were saying, it goes from just being like, okay, this is like a funny little wink wink kind of joke, to it ends up being like almost like they are making fun of like the book or the movie. Like, doesn't the ending suck? Like, this is bad, right? And it's like, all right, well, at some point maybe you should be trying to like not like make fun of the thing that you're trying to make. I don't know. They even make it really bugged me.
They make it like a character thing for him, because at the end of the movie, after they've all survived, well, not all of them, but he's like, no, I think I've got an ending in mind this time for my new book. So they make it like a character trait for him, where he's learned to write a good ending by the end of the movie.
It's that bugged me. That's a little bit too much. And it's also weird. So they they do go to the trouble of showing Bill's wife, and then also when they do Bev's scene, and they show her abusive husband. Those are actually like pretty big characters in the book, and they end up not doing anything with them here, which I technically is a good thing, because the movie is already bloated, so I guess they don't need it. But I mean, I was surprised that they go to the trouble of introducing them here, and then don't actually do anything with them.
I really hated the Bev husband thing, because again, in the book, I see why it makes sense, where you're alternating between stories, and you see her abusive father, and then you sort of contrast that with, okay, now she's grown up, she has an abusive husband, she's kind of like put herself kind of in a similar trapping, right?
Yeah.
But in a sequel to the first movie, because we've already finished the story of her as a kid, and then we start the sequel, and it's like, look, hey, she's got an abusive husband who hits her. I kind of rolled my eyes and went, oh yeah, she's grown up and found a husband who's just like her dad. Like, I don't know, it really made me kind of groan a little bit. I was like, oh, she's not grown at all, and you know, in her 27 years, you know, to get 40, you know, like, I don't know, but, and again, I know it's in the book, and I get that it makes sense in the book because you're contrasting between them as you go. But because they've split it up like this, it just feels like, oh, we're doing this now, okay.
And it also makes more sense in the book because he becomes like a kind of a bigger bad guy, because he ends up like following her to Derry and then ends up, you know, kind of becoming like I guess like an agent of Pennywise, like, you know, kind of the same way Bowers is. So he, you know, he has like a much bigger role, and then and here, it's like kind of shitty because you don't like see him get any comeuppance or anything. You just see him being like a super bad dude, and then ostensibly nothing really happening to him. And then and also I will say it is kind of weird, like and actually going back to the, you know, the opening scene with Adrian Mellon as well. It does feel like these like abusive fight scenes. I don't know. They feel like these are very, very serious things, because these are like, you know, much more like, you know, real world kind of things, because, you know, they're not a CGI clown killing someone. But it feels like
they're very real, like, problems. There's like abusive husbands, homophobia. They're all very real things.
But like the way they're filmed, it seems like kind of like so stylized, and it felt very weird to me, because it felt like, you know, they're trying to film it in like a still entertaining fight scene kind of way, which I think feels very weird to be doing for like a real world, like problematic kind of thing. I don't know.
And I think that's why people have a problem, especially with that opening scene, is that they feel they're just there for like, they almost feel like the social emotional equivalent of torture porn, where it's just there for the like, oh, how bad do you feel that you're watching this happen? Look, how miserable do you feel? Misery porn, I guess is what you'd call it, misery porn. But
I never thought of it like that way, but that's a good way to explain it.
Because they never do anything with them. Like you said, they never bring the husband back and like do something with him, or he gets his comeuppance or something. There's never really like a scene with Beverly where she kind of gets over this, or like kind of like goes from it. Like, it's kind of like weirdly forgotten about. And then, so like, I don't know, that's kind of thing.
Like, she ends up getting like a happy ending and everything, which is great, but like, you don't really see her go through any type of like journey or anything with it.
Yeah, there's nothing like that at all. I would argue like Richie's the only one that really has an arc. Well, that's not entirely true. Richie and Eddie. I think Richie and Eddie have arcs. Yeah. The rest of them, it just kind of feels like they're just kind of scared, but get through it, and then that's it. Oh, okay, we're over now.
Yeah.
Unless we're counting the fact that Bill can now write an ending. Unless that's his arc. Sure.
Yeah.
So they all on you go.
And similar to a complaint I had about the first one is like, I feel like they really do Bev's character injustice in these movies, because if you remember, a complaint about about the first movie is that you know, in the book, Bev is like a very cool character, and they all kind of each have like their own like skill, which they really don't do anything with in this movie. But like, part of the thing is like they all come together and they all kind of have like an ability that they're really good at. Like Eddie was like really good with like maps and directions, and you know, Beverly, like her thing was like she was like a really good shot. Like they were using a slingshot, so that was part of the reason why how they defeated it is like she had this slingshot and they were like using silver, you know, to fight him and stuff. But then, in the first movie, they totally did away with that, and like they basically just turned Bev into like a damsel in distress, where you know she like gets abducted like a, you know, princess in a castle that they all have to go save. And then I feel like similar with this movie, they just don't like give her anything cool to do. You know, she's not really that proactive or fighting back. She's kind of just running away like most of the time. And then like even like later on in the movie when you know, like they're going down to fight it, and she has like this you know, iron or metal like gate thing or whatever, you kind of think like, okay, this is cool. She has she doesn't have a slingshot, but she has this weapon now. But then she just gives it to Eddie and is like, here, like this kills monsters. You can use this. And it's like, oh, so she's not even gonna have like a weapon she's gonna fight with. I don't know. It just feels like they really kind of do her character a big disservice.
Yeah. To be fair though, there's several of them in this movie that I don't feel had much to do.
That's true. Yeah.
Because Ben's whole thing is just that he's in love with Bev. And
yeah,
that's just him dealing with that, and we get the awkward sort of love triangle element to it. Although I suppose at least it never actually tries to do the love triangle drama part of it, because once she realizes she's in love with Ben, and that's who's been after her all this time, it's just like, okay, I'll just forget about Bill now, and Bill doesn't really care. It's just kind of sure, we'll roll with it. Yeah. Why not?
And like in the book, it's kind of weird too, because like they talk about like Bill's wife, and I think they even kind of mention like how he ended up marrying someone that's like very similar to Bev, which is kind of strange. And then it's I have a horrible memory, so I'm a little fuzzy, but I do think grown up Bill and Bev do end up sleeping together in the book, which is kind of weird because Bill is still married, and then Bev and Ben do end up going off together still. So I guess it is kind of good that they don't do that in the movie, at least. But
not the only sex scene they've taken out of the book either.
Yeah, that's another good choice.
Yeah, that was the right choice.
I will give the movie little bits of credit here and there. There is some stuff that was better left out that they did. And then, trying to think. I guess like you said, like no one else is really that interesting. Like like most people, it's just like they call Eddie and it's like, hey, come back, and crashes his car. They call Richie and it's like, hey, come back, and he was just like about to do a set, and he's like, all right. He gets nervous and throws up, and then he just comes back and. It doesn't. I think like Bill and Bev is the only one that really gets maybe anything kind of interesting, I guess, unless you count Stanley's thing, which, oh boy.
Well, remember that other problematic element we were going to talk about? Welcome to Stanley's plotline, because Stanley, who seems to be doing quite well, he's got a nice big house, he's got a wife, and they're going to go on vacation. When he gets the call to go back to Derry, he immediately just goes and commits suicide in the bathtub. And okay, at face value, I'm okay with this, because it's selling how scary it is, right? Like how scary Pennywise is. He just doesn't want to face it, so he commits suicide, right? The problematic element here is that at the end of the movie, they all get like suicide notes from him that are kind of happy suicide notes, where he's so like, weird. Because he's basically like, hey, I knew that I was going to be too weak to help you fight Pennywise, so because of that, I took myself off the board, and that hopefully means that you could win. So it was basically the sacrifice to like save the day. Except normally when this happens, it's like in the heat of the moment when it's like, okay, I'll stay back and like sacrifice myself so that you have time to like disarm the bomb. I'll take on the horde, or I'll fly into the ship. At Independence Day, I'll fly into the ship and blow them all up because I need to do that. Otherwise, everyone's going to die. That's a heroic sacrifice. This is someone getting in a bathtub and slitting their wrists, and it plays so weird that it tries to have this happy kind of twist to it at the end, where it's like, oh, he did this for us, and they're like, this is like such a problematic message to send people about suicide. Like, it's so bad.
Oh yeah, it's really weird. And this is something they added. This isn't in the book. And again, I think it helps that, I think in the original version, like in the book of the miniseries and stuff, it's, I think it's like much scarier that he just commits suicide, and then I forget if there's maybe that much allusions to it, but I also always kind of felt like it wasn't him wholly deciding to do it himself, but maybe Pennywise was influencing him in some way. He was able to get to him early on, in some fashion to make him do that. But here it's just so stupid. It's also such a big fu to his wife, who it's all right, sorry honey, but especially when it's couldn't he have just gotten the same effect by I don't know, like pretending to die and then having them think that he did, like if that was his goal. You know what I mean? Like it's so weird. And especially too when it's like you're saying, like, okay, yeah, there is that kind of trope where you have the hero's sacrifice to win the day, but you already get that with Eddie in the end anyway, who's so it's so weird and dumb, and I don't know why they added it, and I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's absolute garbage. And like you say, like, all I immediately thought is, yeah, but what about your wife? And I don't know if they implied they had kids, but like they seem like they may have kids. You know, they got a big house, and it's the pair of them.
They must have had some life together. I'm assuming he likes his wife.
Yes.
And who knows if they? Yeah, I don't think they're supposed to have kids. I think that's a weird thing too that they mentioned in the book, where like none of them is able to have children until after they defeat it. Or I think there's something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like out of like what 7 40-year-olds, none of them ever had kids. That is kind of weird. Yeah.
But even if you don't have kids, though, maybe you had nieces, nephews, I'm sure friends, in-laws. Like there's a lot of people that it's super weird. Oh, and the other thing I hated, which again, I think they added at least. Again, my memory might be a little hazy, so I don't think this is in the book, but if it is, it's pointless though, where Bev was like having these visions of the future, where I was like, why? Like this is such like a weird thing that goes nowhere and has no point.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It's basically just this motivation for them to all stay because they think they're all going to die if they don't try and fight them.
And this was a big thing I thought was super annoying too. It's like, so you finally get everyone back together, and I feel like they're constantly going like, we got to leave. All right, maybe we'll stay. No, we got to get out of here. Maybe we got to get, no, let's go. Like I feel like, maybe like aside from like a Bill or something, like it seems like Richie and Eddie are constantly like going back and forth between if they're going to stay or going to go.
Yes. That was happening a lot throughout the movie, and it was like, we know you're not going to actually leave, because then the movie would, not be functioning.
Obviously. Yeah.
So they all come back to town. They end up at the Chinese restaurant. I hated a lot of this scene. I hated the CGI goo coming out the middle of the table, and
it looks so dumb.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this. There's a lot of CGI goo like pouring out of places. Yeah, and
again, like this is a big famous scene from the book. It's like when everyone's getting back together, but it's just it felt so annoying. Like it didn't seem like it was, people actually like catching up in a good way. It was just like people annoyingly making like your mother jokes and like, there's a lot of like fat shaming in this movie, which I mean, to be fair, there's in the book too, but like when you're watching the movie and it's just like, all right, like enough like fat jokes about your mom and fat jokes about your wife, and it's just like getting annoying, and like they don't even really like seem like friends. Like Eddie seems like legitimately like pissed off at people. Like it doesn't seem like he's happy in we're making fun of each other but in a friendly way. It seems like he like wanted to fight Richie. And then like also the CGI looked terrible. I don't know, like weird little baby crab demons coming out of the fortune cookie. Like again, like interesting, like imaginative stuff that can work in a book, but that's why when you make a movie, you adapt stuff to make it work to look good on film instead of just being like, oh, this happens in the book, so I guess we got to make it here, even though it looks so dumb.
That's one of those. I was gonna say that's one of those things for me where, from a design point of view, it's one of the things that I don't like, and you're going to hate this comparison, but it's one of the things that I don't like about Del Toro when he does like horror stuff, is that I feel like all this over designed stuff.
Sometimes it gets a little too much with like the CGI. I like a lot of like when he has like practical stuff. I think it looks like really good. But no, like I know sometimes the CGI doesn't always like look great in his things.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to twist the dagger deep. What was your next point?
Oh no, just the end of the scene. I thought was stupid, where he's like, banging the chair against the table, and the waitress just comes and she's like, "Is everything all right?" I was like, "Well, you're being really calm for someone who is like destroying your restaurant."
Yeah, I feel like the reaction here shouldn't be, "Is everything okay?" It should be just to call the police first, and then see where it goes from there.
The same thing with like Bill Hader like yelling in a child's face, and then the parents just being like, "Excuse me," like, no, you would like beat the crap out of this kid. You would call the police, get your child to safety if someone's like yelling and swearing in their face.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are most stand-up comedians, you know, like, I feel like I've never seen a stand-up comedian who's kid-friendly before, to my knowledge. So certainly Richie does not seem like a kid-friendly stand-up comedian. So I was just questioning, because this kid's like 10, and he's like, "I'm a big fan of your comedy work, but you're crazy, so I'm gonna leave." And I'm like, is he watching that? Like, I don't know. I'm just imagining Richie making a lot of sex jokes and a lot of.
Well, the little bit of his act, like he opens up with talking about masturbation.
Yeah,
so
that's true. You're right.
Obviously, with little kids, you know, they're always like sneaking stuff they shouldn't be. So I guess it's not like unimaginable, but it does seem like a little weird that he would be like that big a fan.
Yeah.
Also, I hated the fact that this kid like kept popping up everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just like this one random kid is like in like every scene.
This is the kid who lives in Bell's house. Oh my. Like, you know, like, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And yeah, so there's a couple of scenes of them like sort of realizing stuff again in the hotel or wherever, and ultimately, eventually, because Mike shows Bill first, but then shows everyone else that he's got this magic vase. Or vase, whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, we have to get these tokens from our past and burn them in this, and you know, this comes from the ancient people who tried to beat Pennywise once before. And I hated all this because it felt like just an exposition dump of, you know, it felt like that scene. It comes quite early on in the movie, but it's that scene in the horror movie where they go to the researcher who explains everything.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Mike just knows all this shit, and he has all this information, and he says he stole the thing, but like, I mean, okay, but from where? Like,
yeah, and it's I mean, it does make sense that like Mike's the one that like you know, stays behind in Derry, so he remembers everything, and he's been doing research like all these years, so like that makes sense. It does annoy me though that like in the first movie they took that characteristic away from him and gave it to Ben. Like, Ben was the one who was researching the town and finding out all this stuff about all these like murders and disappearances, so it feels weird that it's like, well, now this is Mike's thing. But whatever. And then like, so the thing with like Pennywise is like, he's like there's this cosmic like level to it in the book, which, you know, which I like. I think some people, you know, some people, I guess you either kind of love it or hate it. But again, like, it's just done so much better in the book, like, versus here, where, yeah, it does feel like the horror movie trope of like a guy like Googling something and finding all the answers. And then I really didn't like the way they kind of portrayed like some of the flashback stuff where they were having like
I hate it, like
the dumb CGI on the vase coming to life, and it is kind of messed up that he does like drug Bill without his consent. So that's not great.
yeah no, it's like, I don't mind the idea of it being cosmic. I mean, I like the idea of more cosmic horror and things, but it's more just how it's presented and how it just kind of feels like pulled out of almost nowhere, even though it's not, because obviously it's in the book and it gets a lot more time in the book. But
yeah.
So yeah,
it doesn't work in the movie, and actually, and maybe you can like help me out here. One thing as I was watching it, as there's a lot of stuff where I was like, okay, I understand where they're going with this because I read the book, but like a lot of people haven't read the book. Like, is this just going to be like, what the hell is going on to most people? Because it goes in some weird places, and you know, even though the book is weird, at least they do a better job of kind of like, you know, bringing you along, whereas here it's just like very, I feel like there's a lot of weird sudden in your face stuff that's like, Jesus, if I didn't read the book, I would probably be so lost on this. I don't know.
There was definitely some things like how they actually eventually beat him, like, came out of nowhere for me. I'm like, wait, why is this beating him?
Yeah,
okay, sure. Like, I didn't really get that. You know, like,
yeah.
Like, because there's one random scene where he kills a girl who's got like a scar on her face.
I will say, actually,
well, not a scar,
this
like
was a
birthmark, but same difference.
Birthmark, yeah. And I will say, I actually really like this scene. It's a new scene from the movie, which, I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons why it's good, because they weren't really beholden to something. But I actually thought this scene was like more of the creepiness that I wanted. And of course, it ends up getting ruined by the end because
CG.
CG. But like all the stuff before that, when it's just Pennywise like hiding half in the shadow and kind of like, tricking this girl, because it's cool that like, it's weird when like a clown is just randomly popping up here, but he's actually like using it to his advantage here when he's trying to bond with her, being because the girl's kind of like, no, you're weird, I'm gonna go, but he's like, oh, I get it because I look different because of my face and stuff, and actually like bonding with her because like she's like, oh well, I look different too. So I actually thought that was really good, but then they ruined it by the end.
Yes. So at this point in the movie, they split up to all go get their things, their various like relics. Actually, first of all, they get Stanley's, which is down in the clubhouse, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was not in the first movie, right?
No.
Yeah. So at some point they built this clubhouse. Yeah,
they like they would like hang out in the barrens, and like there's a whole thing in the book and stuff where they're making a dam there, but like they never had like a clubhouse, especially like a huge clubhouse that no kid could ever build.
Yes, and it's basically, because it's meant to be Ben, who apparently has built the whole thing, because he's an architect, you see, so he's good at building things.
Oh, yeah.
They make up this whole thing where these shower caps, so they couldn't get bugs in their hair, is his artifact, and that kind of weirded me. It was weird to me. I was like, why is this Stanley's artifact that he didn't want bugs in his hair? That doesn't feel that personal.
I guess, yeah.
I know.
It's the artifacts were really weird. Again, this is like a new thing they made up, and like it makes sense. Like some people do have specific stuff that works for them, like Eddie's inhaler. Like, okay, yeah, that works.
To a point, I think the boat, even though it's kind of weird that he gets, that Bill's even able to find it, because it happens to be that Pennywise kind of hands it to him for reasons. Why? Because this is one of the things that I hate about the Bowers thing, is that I heard people talk about in the book. The point of that is to show that Pennywise is actually kind of a little bit scared. The idea that the kids beat him once before, so the idea that he brings Bowers back to town to try and kill them, and he does come to town and try and kill them. But in this movie, there's no hint that Pennywise is scared. If anything, Pennywise seems to want them to be around just so he can get them back for thingy. Whereas I feel like from the book, the idea that he's a little bit scared, so the fact that he's bringing him in is to show that he's a little bit nervous, that maybe they can beat him, to show that he can be defeated, is actually kind of an interesting plot point. But it's not in the movie at all. So which is one reason why I'm bringing this up now, is because, again, why does Pennywise hand over the paper boat to Bill?
Yeah.
When it's the thing that might be used to defeat him? I don't.
Yeah, that's really strange. And like and it would make more sense that he would use his bike, which he calls Silver, which again has a much more big significance in the book, and I kind of thought that was going to be his token at first, but then I guess it's too big to burn, so they couldn't really use it.
Well, because that's the thing, is that when he gets to that street where the drain and all that, and where the old house is, that we get like a flashback of the opening of the first movie, and I'm like, this movie came out 2 years ago. You don't have to flash back to like Georgie coming out and all this stuff. It felt like such wasted time. And even the new flashbacks I didn't like, because it just felt like it wasn't needed. But those ones especially, but it was just clips from the last movie, really bugged me. Although we have skipped over the Stephen King scene, because he gets his bike from a pawn shop, which is owned by Stephen King, and we get to have lots of meta jokes where Stephen King's saying that his endings are bad and stuff.
So I will say, I mean, I did love seeing Stephen King, and he's definitely made appearances in other movies before, but he's not the best actor. But I feel like he's at a great age now where, like, since he can only really play like an old man, it actually works.
Sure.
So I actually thought he was good as a character. There was like some weird, I guess, like jokey stuff, like because Bill's stuttering, so he's asking like how much the bike is, and like he keeps going like, what, the beaver, the banjo, and they keep cutting to different things that start with a B. And again, it's like this is such a weird joke in this movie, like and especially like the kind of like the style of it, where it's like quick shots and like they cut to the banjo and then you hear like a banjo string, and it's like, I don't know why this is in the movie here. It's so strange.
Yeah, the whole scene kind of bugged me. I felt like I don't mind him having a cameo, right? I really don't.
Sure, yeah.
But the scene went on far too long, and there's so much wink. Oh yeah, no, your book's stuck. The ending's bad. I don't want an autograph.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff. Just was like, what are we doing here? Come on.
Yeah, it's just I loved having him there, but it could have just been so short, and you don't need that many jokes.
Yeah, it was weird. So that was his relic. It ends with him yelling at the little boy who was seen before, telling him not to leave town. Like, make up an excuse, get your parents to take you away from here and never come back to Derry. Like, how is a 10-year-old kid going to convince his parents to like leave and move house to a different town? 10-years don't have that power. Anyway, so the Beverly's is the one that you see most of in the trailer. Actually, that first trailer showed you a lot of this scene. Obviously, it's a lot more slower paced in the movie, but where she goes to her old place and it's this old woman living there. Obviously, when she gets outside the building, you find out there's just this derelict building now, and everything was just a mirage by Pennywise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like, they could have been like some cool, like, creepy stuff in it, but like by the end, when it's just a giant CGI naked lady chasing her around the room, it's like, come on.
I hate it. It was so silly and grotesque. It's one of these things where they were too busy, like, thinking of what they could. They never stopped to think if they should. Right? Classic case of that.
I feel like there's like a weird thing in horror movies where you're just supposed to automatically think like an old naked person is scary. It's like, it's just a person, just because they're older. Like,
yeah, the only thing she did that was creepy in the whole scene was when she just paused randomly in the middle of a sentence for like 30 seconds and then started talking again as if nothing had happened. Like, see if she was naked but wasn't CG and wasn't running towards her, and we didn't have the big footstep sound effect. See if it was just like she just stood there naked staring at her. That'd be way more creepy, because it'd be like kind of unsettling. Why is she just staring at me? But no, it's this big grandiose like boo 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 boo. Oh God.
It's too much.
Richie's, because the artifact she gets is the postcard that has the little love poem on it or whatever it is. Richie remembers playing Street Fighter with a guy same age as him. It turns out to be Bauer's cousin, and when he asks him to play another game, he accuses him of being gay, and then they sort of like basically run him out of the arcade. And he has this big scene where the statue in the town centre comes to life and attacks him. And again, big CGI, just kind of silly. For me, it did nothing for me whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's also weird. A lot of people have like very significant stuff, and then it's like Richie's thing is just like a random like arcade token. Like, it doesn't feel that important compared to like, Beverly's poem or the boat that Bill made. This does set up the interesting thing, which actually was an addition to the movie. We actually kind of liked where they are starting to hint that Richie might have been gay, because Pennywise kind of taunts him and says like, "Oh, I know your secret," and then I think like some people are saying like, oh, that guy he was playing with, maybe he might have had a crush on, and then some people kind of started to say later on in the movie that maybe he kind of had like feelings for like Eddie or something, which I actually think is like a really interesting addition, and I kind of like that they hint at it, but it's not like like a big full blown thing where like takes over the character or something. It's just kind of something that they throw there, which but I'll give them a credit for that. I think that was kind of an interesting addition that they put in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a nice little bit, because he has the biggest arc in the movie, because a lot of it is him like being too scared and wanting to leave, and then ultimately is willing to like fight for his friend and kind of thing. Like, he has the most arc in there. In fact, the one thing that made me laugh is when he goes to the synagogue and we see like Stanley's baptism. Or his baptism, sorry, his bar mitzvah. was the phrase I was looking for. And Stanley just sort of makes this speech about how he's a loser and he always will be. And young Richie just tries to give him a standing ovation and is grabbed by one of the. That was the only thing in the movie that made me laugh. That was the only thing that made me laugh in the whole movie.
I'll give that to him.
Yeah. So Eddie goes to a pharmacy. And then apparently when he was a kid, we see the scene we never saw it in the first movie, where he saw like behind the curtain, like someone being like operated on or whatever.
It was like his mom was down in the basement, and then they bring back the leper that like attacked him in the first movie.
And then, you know, and this is the scene that has the music that plays when he's getting because he gets vomited on. Again, it's very Evil Dead 2. Yeah, which feels so out of place in this movie. But he gets vomited on, and this song kicks in, and
and it's like so weird because it's like it's not like there's a precedent for it. Like, it's not like they've been doing this throughout the whole movie, and the song is just there for like a brief second, but it's just so like it takes away any, if there was, you know, going to be any creepiness or anything, it totally takes away from that. It feels like such a, you know, like something they would do like in a, you know, like comic book movie or something nowadays, you know, where they kind of have like a pop song play, and it's just it really really irked me. Like, I'm okay again with, you know, adding like comedy here and there, but it just doesn't feel like the kind of movie for it, especially like, you know, in these specific scenes. And even before that too, when he's like talking to the pharmacist, who's like the guy from the first movie, but he's all old now, and then he's like farting and stuff, and it's like, what the hell is this? This is so bizarre, and I like kind of hate it. Like really bugging me.
So that was he gets his inhaler, and then Ben is in school. He goes to school. There's a flashback where young Beverly talks to him and says he's a fat, ugly loser who she would never kiss. But obviously it's not really her, it's Pennywise, and he hides in the locker. But he finds he actually doesn't have to find anything. This is the weird thing about this scene, is that he actually already has his token in his wallet the whole time, which is the yearbook page that Beverly signed because she was the only one who did.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, whatever.
Like, I don't think it's a bad idea for a scene. It's totally unnecessary. And like everything else in this movie, it's kind of ruined by like CGI. But like, I don't know, I guess the idea behind it, I was okay with, but yeah, I don't know why.
That's the thing. We're describing all these scenes where they all go off to get their own tokens, and they all just feel so. You know, they pad out the runtime so much because it's this series of all shorts that we have to go through. What does Mike have to go do again? Remind me.
Well, I mean, he's already been in Derry, so he doesn't really have to visit anything. I don't know if I remember what his token was. It was the rock that Beverly threw. Oh, right, yeah.
It was the rock with some blood on it. Yeah, he doesn't get a scene. Yeah, so he just doesn't get one. Because of course.
Yeah, he's. I mean, you do find out that he's like living in the library. So
as you do.
That's cool. I guess I actually heard on another podcast they mentioned this, which I don't know how anyone would see this, but they did say that he's the assistant librarian, and that the actual librarian is Wendy Torrance, which okay. I guess that's an Easter egg. Like, I think there's like a nameplate or something you can see somewhere on there, but it's like one of those things where I don't know how you would ever catch it. But
well, there is a bigger Shining reference later. There's a "Here's Johnny" at one point, which I'm not going to lie, made my edge roll pretty significantly.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, it's around this time Bowers shows up, and I didn't hate the scene where he stabs Eddie in the face, and then Eddie kind of stabs him through the shower curtain, and he's just kind of like, you know, hobbling back with a knife in his stomach, but the shower curtain's been dragged with it. Like, that was okay for what it was. And of course they run off to try and save Mike because Mike's the next one being attacked, and I think it's actually Richie who kills him with the axe, because there's a shot the first time we see the light inside the library. There's like a close up of this axe in a case, like this like old axe, and I'm like, okay, well, that's Chekhov's axe. Someone's using that later. Someone's getting hacked. So, you know, and then it's like, oh, we have to go do this, and there's a little detour with Bill because he goes off to try and save the kid because he gets a message from Pennywise that he's going after him at the fair. So that's when we get the Hall of Mirrors scene where he's running after the kid, and Pennywise kills the kid in front of him. I'm surprised that the kid never came back. I thought when they were going to beat him at the end that the victims would come back, the ones that he'd taken recently.
I wasn't like positive if this was something that actually happened or if this was like a delusion from Pennywise that he was like taunting Bill. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was going to turn out that it didn't actually happen to the kid or something like that. Yeah, where no, the kid's okay. I guess as it is, it's just a dark a kid got killed, which again is where the tone's all over the place. You've got these silly jokes, and then you've got a kid being murdered. It's just
exactly
all over the place. But of course, they go to the house, they go into the sewer area and all the rest of it, and I remember actually seeing when they make the decision to go there, and you realize we're going to Act 3 because they're going to fight Pennywise. I think there was 45 minutes of the movie left, and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be so stretched out, and it kind of was. Pennywise, they think they've beat him when they put the artifacts in the thing, but he becomes a giant CGI spider thing. Of course, actually, in the house before they go down, there's the spider head. It's like Stanley's kid head that becomes a spider, and this is the one where I'm like, no, I saw this in the thing with practical effects, and it was way better. This was just goofy, slapsticky CG, throwing things around.
Yeah, and and again, I don't mind the idea of but there's a more notable scene in the book in the miniseries where you do see one of them opens up a fridge and Stan's head is in it. It's usually the adult version, but in this case it's the kid version. But I can see the idea of a floating head, or if it becomes like a little spider head and then kind of running around. I can see the idea where that's fun, but in this movie again, the CGI doesn't look good, and when they're making little quips and jokes about it, it's not funny, and I just wasn't crazy about it.
That's
and so much of this movie is the whole thing is you like these characters, you want them to be together, and it feels like they're just constantly getting separated. They reunite in the town, and then it's well, you got to go off by yourself, okay? And then they come back together, and then it's oh, but then this person leaves, and he's going to fight Pennywise. All right, well, we'll meet up and we'll fight Pennywise together. And then as soon as they're in the house, they instantly get split up again. And then, it's they're just constantly not together. And that's one of the fun things is you want to see these characters and this cast that you like together. I feel like they're constantly not.
No, I get that totally. And when they eventually have to split up again during the big fight with Pennywise, and they all have their own hallucinations, their own things, where Bev's in a toilet cubicle flooding, as Ben's being buried alive with dirt or whatever it is, and they all have their own thing, and we have the whole three doors joke with Richie and Eddie.
And I feel wow, I was surprised. I was this seems like something that maybe you would do in in a Marvel movie or something, where maybe 10 movies later they might reference something from an early movie that's oh, hey, that's kind of funny, I remember that. This, it feels weird. It's you're making jokes and references to something that was just a movie from 2 years ago. It's not oh, the not scary door and the scary door, that it's not that was a big iconic thing that everyone remembers from the first movie that we can't wait to see them reference again. It just felt I don't know, a dumb thing to throw in.
Yeah. And
then of course you have to get the dog joke.
The dog joke, yes, where they open the not scary door and it's just a little dog. I don't know. The whole thing was just really bloated at the end for me. These big CGI arms running around with Pennywise and try to stab them. And of course, Eddie does get stabbed after he does heroically save Richie, which feeds off the fact that he didn't earlier on when he was being attacked with a small spider head. It's the whole thing. And then they ultimately beat him by just telling him that he's not scary.
Yeah, there's a thing they basically say oh, he has to abide by the laws of the form he's taken or whatever, so that we have to convince him that he's not scary, which the whole story is about fear, so it does make sense that the way you beat him is by not being afraid and getting him to feel fear. So I'm totally okay with that, but then the way they do it in this, it's just kind of weird and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think the movie actually hits that point home enough. That it is just about fear. But yeah, they all just kind of yell at him, "You're a clown. You're nothing but a clown. You're just a clown." Until he goes into the little jar, and that's basically. Or actually, that doesn't even go in the jar. He just melts, right? He just kind of melts.
He's kind of like there's like a thing he's in. I don't even know like what you would call it. It's like kind of this weird. I guess it'd be like that. This whole underground place is like where he first landed when he came to Earth or whatever. But yeah, he kind of has like almost looks like a weird throne or nest or something that he kind of sits in, and then he ends up just kind of like fading into it.
Yeah, the movie just kind of wraps up there. Oh, I mean, there's a lot of epilogue stuff, but that's the end of the story. You know, Eddie's dead. They have to run out of the house because the house is all collapsing and like sinking into like a sinkhole, and and that's when we get the really poor taste suicide note where they all sort of get this at the same time. You know, and we see that, you know, Mike's finally leaving Derry. Ben and Bev are together on a boat and they're happily forever after and whatever else. Anyway, because even the ending to me almost feels like the end of a Lord of the Rings movie, where there's just all these little tacked on epilogues, like just everyone's all happy, all these things, and yada yada yada. And you know, there was an interview recently with like threatening that there's maybe enough mythology for a third movie. I'm like, no, I don't. Please don't.
Yeah. And that was a big worry of mine that this was going to make a lot of money and they're going to like, well, we got to keep it going, which I don't want to see. I mean, who knows though? Maybe if they do another one, but you know they're not so tied to trying to fit stuff into the book or something. Maybe they could actually be better. I don't know. But at least now I'm not too hopeful. I was happy when it ended. I just really like. I mean, obviously we're being very negative. Like, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Like, I guess on one hand, I maybe do applaud him a little bit for trying to incorporate so much stuff from the book. I guess even though it was done poorly, but I mean, I feel like it could have been like a lot worse. But I don't know. I guess maybe the kind of mediocrity, the genericness of it. Maybe it would have been better if it was just a little crazy, or even if it was worse.
I feel like it kind of suffers from Bram Stoker's Dracula, that movie, a little bit. The same kind of syndrome where it's obsessed with putting a lot of things in from the book, but it kind of misses the nuance and what actually makes those moments work in the book. I would much rather have a slower pace thing that actually takes its time and really nails. And it's crazy that I'm saying that because the movie's 2 hours and 50 minutes. Yeah, I'm saying that it needs to be more slow paced in some ways, but it does kind of for some of the horror stuff. It needs to be less kind of snappy and more like tense building.
Well, I think what you're saying is get rid of a lot of the stuff that you don't need, and then take more time with the stuff that you do. Yeah, that's I agree with that.
There you go. That's a perfect way to put it. I mean, we're pretty much. I'm sure we've glossed over a couple of moments, but I think ultimately the way I felt during this movie was just kind of. Like, I was ready for it to end, like, quite early. Like, I was ready for it to just get through the motions and just wrap up because it wasn't doing anything to grab me.
It's so weird. I don't know why like movies have to be so long. Like with movies like this and like comic book movies, it's like, wouldn't you save money by having shorter movies? Like, people are still gonna see it anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, I get why like something like Endgame has to be very long, but I don't know if you're just doing a new Thor movie, a Guardians movie, like, doesn't need to be more than 2 hours. Like. Honestly, like, a nice 100-minute movie, that goes a long way.
Yeah, it does. So what are you going to rate this, Timbo?
I mean, we're definitely really negative, but again, it's not the worst thing in the world, so I'm not gonna give it like a 1 or anything. Like, I do wish it was a lot better, and there were moments here and there that I did enjoy, and I do like the cast, and again, there are some moments that I'm like, oh, this isn't bad, or I can see how this would be good. Maybe it's just the CGI or something ruins it for me. So I'm gonna give it a 4, which is not a good score. Actually, maybe I'll even go as high as like a 4.5 because I don't know, like I there was enough there that I liked, and maybe it is because I like the book so much that there was. Maybe I give a little credit for some stuff more than I should, but like it could have been a lot worse. But it's still not very good. I can't give it that high of a score.
Yeah, I'm going to go with straight 4. It's not the worst thing ever. It's very comparable to Pet Sematary, to be honest. Maybe a little bit better from earlier this year, but. Yeah, rough time. Like, there's a reason why Stephen King adaptations don't excite me that much, is because so many of them suck. So many of them do. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
I mean, what I kind of miss, like with this and Pet Sematary, is like, I mean, even though we're talking a lot about like, there being jokes and stuff, like I still think it takes itself very seriously. Where like I do miss, like, we did have a lot of good like Stephen King adaptations in the 80s and stuff, but I do kind of miss there was a period where we got like really bad ones, but at least they were bad in a fun way. Freaking Skype. I keep getting like these calls like you're calling me even though we're on the line. Fun tech stuff.
Don't worry about that.
I do miss like if we're gonna have like bad Stephen King adaptations, at least have them be like fun bad. Like I don't like to do these ones that are just like trying to be so serious and scary, and they're just not. I need better direction, I think, first and foremost, and then for this one I really need a tighter script. I need something that actually focuses things in a bit. It feels so bloated, and in a way that it feels it's not even adding that much to it. Like, it feels like it's almost 3 hours long, and yet I felt like not a lot happened for a lot of the movie, and that's kind of a rough time. So 4 out of 10 from me. Yeah, so that's Stephen King's It Chapter 2. Not a great time, and I was definitely more positive on the first one. I think I give it like I may have even went as high as a 7 on the first one, and I mean, honestly, like retroactively, after thinking about it, I think my score for the first one is going to go down a little bit, because I do think I give it something somewhat high, like maybe even like an 8-ish in that realm.
I think I'm going down as well. I feel like not just because this one taints it a little bit, but because I think the problems I had, if I tried watching the first one again, it would probably be more pronounced. It would probably bother me even more than the first time.
Yeah, and again, like, just to really stress it, it's like. Like, to me, even if it was like, if we combine the two together, even if it was maybe like a 6 or something, which is still like, not great, but whatever, kind of middling territory, it still bothers me when I love the book so much. And like, for me, the book is like a 12 out of 10. It's like, all right, to have like an adaptation that is like just okay, kind of annoys me.
Yeah, and as someone who's not read the book, this adaptation did not work for me at all. So it's not pleasing either of us. I'm sure some people will like it, but I
don't want to take away from anyone that did. Like, it's that's totally fine. I'm sure it's going to make a lot of money, and that's the only thing that worries me, is like I don't want to see it giving inspiration to like other movies, but like, oh yeah, we gotta start doing like the big budget, big name kind of thing for our horror movies. It's definitely not something I want. Maybe an odd movie here and there could work, but overall not really. Yeah, so there you go. That is it, Chapter 2, which brings an end to this I think fairly long episode of Screams After Midnight. You can, of course, check out our Twitter at Screams Midnight. If you want to do that, you can like and subscribe and tell us what you think of the movie in the comments below. You may or may not disagree with us. You can, of course, as we said earlier, go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us that way. That has been Screams After Midnight. That has been our discussion of It Chapter 2. Hopefully we weren't too negative and miserable for you, although we probably were. But we'll see you next time. What else is new?
Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.